apologise for that, but I think you'll find this a bit more interesting.
Face front, true believers, it's the Steeven Orr podcast, episode number 8. Welcome to another episode of the Steeven Orr podcast, the show bent on world domination. I'm your host, Steven, and I've been watching a lot of the Comic Book Men recently. This was a show on AMC with Kevin Smith's show set in his comic book store, Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash. And if you've ever seen Pawn Stars, this is Pawn Stars in a comic book store. But they have these little interludes. They begin and end each episode, and then they have these little interludes in which they are doing a podcast called Comic Book Men, and they're talking about what happened over the course of the week in the store, and then they show what happened along with it. But Kevin Smith starts every episode by saying, "Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comic Book Men podcast, the only podcast that..." Basically the same way I start most of my episodes. And I just want to say that I did it first, over a decade ago, sucker. Of course, he's a better writer and he has a bigger audience, but that's not the point. All right, so things are going to be just a slight bit different on the podcast going forward. Working the two jobs that I do, I don't have a lot of time to really sit down and do a lot of editing when it comes to this show. And when I'm doing the silly stuff that I love, the commercials and the sketches and all that, it does take a lot of editing. It takes a lot of time to do that. And I thought I was going to be able to have enough time to do that, but circumstances have arisen and I am not able to do that as much as I want. So we're still going to have pretty much the same basic podcast. I'm going to talk about nerd stuff. It's just that it's just not going to have all that silly stuff. And what we're going to do instead is I'll have a segment here at the beginning in which I have announcements, any news stories that might make me happy or angry. And then we'll talk about comics and we'll talk about TV and movies if there's anything that I've watched that I want to talk about. And then what I'll do is in between each one of the segments, I am going to play a bit of a song from wherever. For example, this episode, we're going to hear some music from kHill. And I'll have information on where to find him and where to look up, to get his music and whatnot. Next episode, we're probably going to feature some songs from Adam Warrock. And whoever is willing to let me play their songs on my show, that's the music we're going to listen to. Just some updates on what's going on with me. I finished the volume 3 of Paper Girls. If you remember in episode 2, I talked about the first. It was actually a hardback collection. I was reading it digitally, but it was the first 10 issues of Paper Girls, which, if you're reading the trade paperbacks, would be volumes 1 and 2. Well, recently, just last night actually, I finished volume 3, which collects issues 11 through 15, and this book still really kicks a lot of butt. I mean, this is just a great book. Who'd have thunk that I would be enjoying a book about 4 12-year-old girls who deliver papers? But it's pretty awesome. If you haven't read it, you should. I'm not really going to talk about it on this episode, but beyond that, man, I've got a lot of trades that I picked up from the library that I'm hoping to be able to talk about moving forward. I'm going to start doing this new thing on my other podcast, which is the podcast that is exclusive to patrons over on the Patreon, where I'm going to do single issue episodes. I'm calling them single issue episodes, where I just pick a random comic and talk about it. Just a random single issue from amongst my collection. And it's literally going to be, I'll just reach into a box, pull out a comic, read it, and then just talk about it. And so far I've done 2. I've only released 1. The other one I'm banking. I'm going to try to do as many as I can and just keep them banked, because they're only going to be about 15-20 minutes long. But the one that is out right now, I'm talking about Daredevil issue 168, which is the first appearance of Elektra. So that's out there right now if you're a patron. If you're not, I'm only asking $1 a month. $1 a month, and you're getting an extra podcast a week. You get this one for free, and this podcast is pretty amazing. But you'll also get my other podcast, which is called My Other Podcast. And lately I've been releasing 2 episodes a week because they're really easy and quick to put together, and they're not that long, and I can throw them together pretty quickly and get them out there on the Patreon. So I encourage folks to do that. As far as what else I'm reading right now, I picked up the first trade of Power Pack Classic Volume 1, an old Marvel comic from the 80s starring a super team of small children. I'm looking forward to reading that. And I downloaded on the Hoopla a DC collection that collects all of John Byrne's work through DC that wasn't, like single issues that he did, like annuals and special issues and whatnot. So I started reading that the other day, and it's a lot of fun. Beyond that, the only other thing I want to talk about before we really get into some comic goodness, it appears that they canceled Iron Fist on Netflix after season 2, which is a shame. I am one of the few people that did somewhat enjoy season 1, and season 2 was even better. And of course, it ended in such a mind-blowing fashion that I have to see how that all turns out. Now, I think the blurb that they put out there, the announcement, did say something to the effect of, we're not done with Iron Fist on Netflix, but we're just done with the show. So if that means, please, a Heroes for Hire, Power Man and Iron Fist show, that needs to happen. Probably what it means more than anything is that Iron Fist is going to show up in some of the other shows, and maybe we'll get another Defenders season. Who knows? But that's really all I got as far as your opening announcements and news and stuff that's going on in my nerd life. So how about we just move on? I got 2 different comics that I want to talk about. We're going to talk about an old 3-issue run of Daredevil from the 80s, and then we're going to talk about Irredeemable by Mark Waid and Peter Krause. So let's take a little break, listen to a little music, and we'll come back and we'll talk about some Daredevil.
To be living with a dream.
It's been a long struggle, used to feel less worth it. These days it takes me places I don't even know if I deserve it. But there's moments nobody understands the hurt, and rather be with my kids than standing here blurting words that people who might never understand. The things that I say or the way that I am, I hear a little girl's voice on the phone and understand it. Girl, you do come first and you're too little to get it. I know it's the worst and that's why I have to do this. I can't stop, oh hard until my heart finally stops. And when you're finally old enough to understand, hope you find it in your heart to forgive your old man.
Hush, hush, little baby, don't you cry.
I'll be home soon, I swear it.
Hush, hush, little baby, don't you cry.
I'll be home soon. I was on my way to Brooklyn with the tears in my face. You said to come home, but I was too far for that place. I was driving through the snow, tires took me further away. Talking about the fire level.
Okay, full disclosure here. As of the time I'm recording this episode, I know that I'm going to be playing songs by kHill. I haven't actually decided which songs I was going to put in the episode, so I have no idea what it was you just listened to. I know it was good, but I don't know which song you just listened to, or part of the song, because I'm not putting the full songs in. But I will choose them and put them into the episode as I'm editing, and I will have all the information as far as which songs they were in the show notes of the episode and how to find them and all that good stuff online. So as I said before the break, we're going to be talking about some issues of Daredevil. I mistakenly said a 3-issue run. It's actually a 4-issue run. Daredevil issues 169 through 172 from March of 81 through July of 81. And these actually come from a collection that I got through Hoopla that is the Frank Miller Daredevil Volume 1. And it collects Daredevil issues 158 through 161. It skips issue 162 and then moves on to issues 163 through 172. It also includes, at the very beginning of the trade, 2 issues of Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, issues 27 and 28. And I believe the only reason they put them in is because they both feature Daredevil, and both of them were penciled by Frank Miller. Now, the 4 issues I'm going to talk about, they were all written and drawn by Frank Miller. Klaus Janson was the inker. Glynis Wein was the colorist, and Joe Rosen was the letterer. Now, I just happened to be reading Daredevil and thinking ahead to Friday. The new season of Daredevil is coming on to Netflix, season 3. And based on what very little I know about the season, if you're trying to avoid any kind of spoilers, even though the shows aren't out yet, then you don't want to listen. I spoil the crap out of stuff. But what little I know about this upcoming season is that A, the Kingpin is back, and B, Bullseye is in it. So as I'm reading through this collection of Daredevil comics, I get to these last 4 issues, 169 through 172. And I start to think, is there a good chance that season 3 will be loosely based off of these 4 issues? Because A, Bullseye is featured in these 4 issues, and B, Daredevil encounters the Kingpin for the first time. And it's actually, Kingpin is out of the country and then comes back for a particular reason. And it involves Bullseye. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking to myself, well, there's really no reason why you wouldn't base an entire season out of this 4-issue run. It would be really easy, easy to do. It's a really good storyline. And I would not be surprised if I start watching Daredevil on Friday and find that I am correct. Of course, I might be wrong. But that's the reason why I wanted to talk about these 4 issues, because I have a feeling that we're going to see some of this in season 3. So the first issue is issue 169. It's just simply entitled Devils. And what we have here is Bullseye has escaped from jail. And he seems to have gone over the bend. He's gone up against Daredevil at least once, probably twice. I believe twice by this point. I know that earlier in these issues, he had hired some men to quote unquote kill Daredevil, though he didn't expect any of them to succeed. He just wanted to get film footage of Daredevil fighting so he could prepare himself to fight him. But Daredevil, of course, wins, and Bullseye goes to jail, and now he's broken out, but he seems to be a little twisted in the head, because everyone that he sees as Daredevil. And there's this scene in the opening of the comic book where he's walking down the street and everybody on the street is Daredevil. And he just starts killing people because he thinks they're all Daredevil. And it's really quite horrifying because he's literally just walking down the sidewalk in New York City. Think about New York City sidewalks, how busy they are, just full of people. And he's got a knife and he's just stabbing people and killing them. And eventually he runs across a tailor shop. He goes in, he convinces the guy to see, somehow I'm sure by threat of violence, convinces the man to put together a new Bullseye costume for him. And then, of course, he kills the man. And then we find out that the reason why this is going on is just before he broke out of jail, he was actually scheduled to have surgery. They discovered that he had a brain tumor. And this might be the reason why he's going a little crazy. And so Daredevil wants to go find him. He wants to save him. Bullseye is, at this point, he's now in a movie theater where they're watching some Humphrey Bogart movie. And I don't know why he went to the movie theater. He's just hanging out in there. And he's talking to himself. loudly, and somebody behind him is like, hey, jerk, keep it down, which, of course, Bullseye thinks it's Daredevil and starts kicking this person's butt. Daredevil happens to be coming by. Somebody runs out of the theater. Oh my gosh, I can't believe what's happening in there. And Daredevil rushes in to put a stop to it. Now, this is when the fight commences. And really, the whole purpose of this issue is that, as far as how it ties into the other three issues, Daredevil and Bullseye have this epic battle that leads from the movie theater into a subway, because he fights him in the movie theater. Bullseye gets away because he has two hostages. Daredevil manages to track him down again, and they have a fight they start out in an apartment building, because Bullseye takes these two hostages back to their apartment. Daredevil catches up with them there. They start fighting. He crashed through the door of the apartment. They're rolling down the stairs. Bullseye runs away. He goes into a subway. Daredevil runs into the subway. A blast of a horn from a train that's passing by just, does havoc on his radar senses and screws his hearing up. So now he's deaf, but he tackles Bullseye and they fall off of the platform onto the tracks, and they're just fighting. They're just kicking the crap out of each other. And eventually Daredevil wins. Bullseye is laying on the tracks. He's unconscious. He can't move. Daredevil is out of strength. He can barely move. He can barely pick himself up. But there's a train coming. There's a train. I hear that train a-coming. And Daredevil, for a moment, thinks, you know what? I don't even have the strength to lift myself barely off these tracks. I'm just going to leave him. But at the last moment, he manages to dig up enough strength, pull Bullseye from the tracks, and save Bullseye's life. And the detective that he's been working with, I don't remember his name, he's pretty upset about that. How dare you save a man's life? And, Daredevil, well, I can't just let somebody die, if there's something that I can do to prevent that. And of course, the detective tells him, you realize that he's probably not going to go to prison, that they're going to use his brain tumor as his defense, that temporary insanity based on his brain tumor. Everyone that he's killed up until this point, they're going to let him go. And Daredevil said, Daredevil's like, well, if that's what happens, that's what happens. So then we move into issue number 170, and it's called The Kingpin Must Die. And we find out that the Kingpin of crime is now living in New York City. He was living in New York City. Now he's living in Japan. He has married a woman named Vanessa, who we have met in the TV show. And he is living in Japan, and he's no longer involved in crime. He's a spice merchant. But he has millions and millions and millions of dollars that he did acquire illegally. So they're living in comfort. And when we first meet the Kingpin in Frank Miller's run, he is actually in a dojo, and he's fighting a handful of men. And it looks like, 1, 2, 3, 4, possibly 6 men, some of which are armed with staves and nunchucks. And the Kingpin takes them all out. And he's kind of upset about that. He tells his right-hand man, Mr. Lynch, next time, this was too easy. Next time, I want more men and more of them using weapons. And one of these guys is on the floor, and he's getting and one of his friends is helping him up, and he's like, we're all world-class martial artists, and he just went through us like we were nothing. And refer to him as the Kingpin, which the Kingpin tries to kill him for, but Vanessa shows up and talks, you're not supposed to be doing this kind of stuff anymore, honey bunny, doodly-doo. And of course, the Kingpin doesn't kill him. Now, in the meantime, his right-hand man, Lynch, he's kind of upset about this. He feels that the Kingpin has lost his edge, and if he's wrapped around Vanessa's little finger and she calls the shots now, and he's not that happy about it. In the meantime, back in New York, actually, before we go back to New York, somebody shows up because we find out that the Kingpin has files on all these crime bosses in New York. So once he left, it opened up a vacuum, and now there's all these various crime bosses trying to, run all the crime in New York. And the district attorney wants to put them all in jail. And Wilson Fisk, the kingpin, has all these files on these men, and everything that he has could put them all into prison, send them all to prison for the rest of their lives. And the district attorney is trying to make a deal with Wilson Fisk because he doesn't go by the kingpin anymore. So I'm going to stop calling him the kingpin. And Vanessa, his wife, is not only encourages him to do so, she goes to New York to hire the services of Murdoch and Nelson as Wilson Fisk's lawyer. Now, he of course sends with her a couple of bodyguards. She comes to New York. She meets with Matt Murdock and Foggy, and gunshots suddenly sail through the windows, and Matt ducks out, changes into Daredevil, goes to find out what's going on. It was all a distraction because when he gets back, Vanessa has been kidnapped. So this is all part of this big scheme to get Wilson Fisk to come back to New York. Now, in the meantime, Bullseye has had his surgery. His brain tumor has been removed, and of course, he has been released from prison as an innocent man. Daredevil follows him, and he finds out that these crime bosses have hired Bullseye to kill Wilson Fisk. They just need to get him back in the country, back to New York, and they do that by kidnapping Vanessa. Daredevil and Bullseye have a big fight. Bullseye kicks his butt, and that's pretty much how the issue ends. So issue 171, Wilson Fisk has now come to New York, and he's got a plan. He knows how to get Vanessa back, and so he's got his briefcase full of all the files. They tell him that the bad guy, the crime bosses say, meet us at this construction site, come alone. His right-hand man, Mr. Lynch, drives him there, and he tells Lynch, you want me to come with you, boss? And he says, no, you stay in the car. If you don't want anything to happen to you, you stay in the car and keep the windows up. So Fisk goes out into the construction site. There's Vanessa tied to an I-beam, and he sets the briefcase down, clicks a little button, and this sonic, high-pitched sonic frequency comes out of the briefcase and disables everyone within the vicinity, except for him because he's wearing earplugs, and except for Lynch, who's in the car with the windows up. And so just like that, he's won. He's got Vanessa back. He's going to go free her. They're going to go back to Japan. They're going to put all these men in prison. But somebody lurking in the shadows fires a mortar or a rocket or something, blows up the building that's being constructed, and all of the entire building falls on top of Vanessa, apparently killing her. Wilson Fisk goes back to the car. Lynch is there. He tells Lynch what's happened, and Lynch said, it was them. It was the crime bosses. You can't let them get away with this. They killed your wife. And so he goes, you have to take over. You have to kill them all, take over, and punish them. And he becomes the kingpin again. And so that's what he does. There's actually a really good moment where, we're not there yet. So Daredevil goes to a bar called Josie's, where all these criminals, low-level criminals, hang out, such as Turk. You'll know these names from the show if you've never read the books. And he goes in his regular clothes, but he's got like a little hat on and sunglasses, so nobody can recognize that he's Matt Murdock. And he wants information about the Kingpin. He wants to meet the Kingpin, and everybody in the bar decides, oh, you said Kingpin's name, we're all going to beat you up. And he kicks everybody's butt. He beats everybody up in the bar. And he ends up being taken to the Kingpin, and he tells the Kingpin that he wants to work for him, that he is a great assassin. And a guy comes up behind him with a gun, and without even looking at him, Daredevil throws like a pin behind him, and it goes into the barrel of the gun. And Kingpin's like, you're hired. But of course, while Kingpin leaves, and Matt Murdock uses this opportunity to try to steal the files, Kingpin knew that he was lying all along, and he kicks Matt's butt and has Turk and a couple other guys take him off somewhere to kill him. I'm trying to be brief here. So then what happens here is, so they kill Vanessa. Kingpin becomes the kingpin of crime again, and Daredevil has been thrown into a big water pipe to drown to death. That's where this issue ends. Then we come to issue 172, the last issue. It's called Gang War. Daredevil, of course, escapes, and the Kingpin holds a meeting and invites all these crime bosses to the meeting. And they bring Bullseye with him. And there's this really great moment where Kingpin he comes to the meeting. All the crime bosses are sitting around the table. Kingpin sits down and they're all like, what's he going to do? We got Bullseye here. And Bullseye comes up behind Kingpin and is holding a gun to the back of his head. And Kingpin basically says, you know, I'm kind of counting on Bullseye's intelligence here, because I think deep down he knows that you guys are through, and that if he wants any kind of future and he wants to be paid, he's going to back me instead of you. And Bullseye kind of thinks to himself, you know what, he's right. And he puts his gun away. And the Kingpin doesn't kill these men, however. He tells them, I'm not going to kill you, but you know what? I am going to send you all to prison, because that's what you deserve. Well, in the meantime, Daredevil comes and he finds Bullseye and they start fighting. But there's this moment where after the meeting, Kingpin is sitting at the table and his man Lynch comes in and he goes, wasn't that great? Did you see the looks on their faces? They're never going to cross you again. And Kingpin just grabs him by the back of the head and smashes his face into the table. And he tells him, I know that you're the one that fired that rocket that killed my wife. And the reason he knows is because Lynch has had a headache for the past however long it's been since it happened, because he was out there when that sonic frequency was going on and he didn't get the full blast. He got enough to get a headache. And so Kingpin beats him to death with his bare hands. So Daredevil tracks down where Bullseye is, and the issue ends with Daredevil and Bullseye fighting. Daredevil's really kind of upset because he let Bullseye live. He had the chance to stop him. He let Bullseye live. Anybody that Bullseye killed after that point the blood is on Daredevil's hands. Hello, Mr. Train. And so they're fighting, and there's a really awesome scene here where Bullseye is on top of Daredevil punching him, and then he grabs Bullseye by the throat to choke him to death. And Daredevil grabs Bullseye by the throat. So yeah, Bullseye's on top of Daredevil punching him. Bullseye grabs Daredevil by the throat to choke him to death. Daredevil then grabs Bullseye by the throat, and they're both squeezing each other's throat. Who's gonna back off first? Well, it's Bullseye. Once he realizes that Daredevil's gonna kill him too, he starts freaking out and he lets go and he's begging him, please don't kill me. And in the end, he doesn't. He just chokes him unconscious. And Kingpin shows up and he says, here, I'm going to let you live, Daredevil. Here's my briefcase with all the files from all these crime bosses. You take it to where it needs to be so they can all go to prison. And Daredevil leaves. And then there's a one-page epilogue at the end where we find out Vanessa is still alive, but she doesn't remember anything. And that's how the run ends. It was freaking awesome. It was a great story. The art was so-so in certain areas, but great in others. I think Frank Miller in general is not a great artist. It depends on what he's drawing, but when he has a good inker to ink on top of him, I think some of his art is very dynamic. He writes, he has really good, poses and sees things from different angles. But I have a feeling this is what we're going to see in season 3 of Daredevil. And if not, doesn't matter. You were probably going to get a great story there in season 3 of Daredevil, and we got a great story here in volume 1 of Frank Miller's Daredevil. And that's all I got to say about this issue. Let's take another break. We'll listen to some more music. Then I'm going to come back and talk about Irredeemable.
I was born born to a broken home. Mother and father gone, most of my days I'm sitting here alone. Spent my time studying, thinking of something better. The world was a dark place before we stood together. I could feel I was meant for something greater than this. I knew who knew that something would take shape in you. I saw something I thought you saw in me. Something must have changed, we drifted eventually. We could have stood at this hill to the end of time, but he had other plans, and truthfully your heart was never mine. Who can blame you? Eventually turned away, so I filled my time with darker pursuits. I must say, it's true I would have hurt him if it wouldn't have hurt you. Instead I held my tongue rather than just prove I was the monster you were afraid I'd become. Change my path, become a better someone. Carry this torch with me for a long time. Carry this with me till the day I die. Even now when I close my eyes, I only see your face. Always carry this torch with me for a long time. Carry this with me till the day I die. Even now when I close my eyes, I only see your face. Always. Once you were gone, I thought that empty space inside. Nowadays, it's behind a scowl where I hide. Spent so many years just living a lie, but not for all the right reasons. It's
Okay,
true.
we're back, and this time we're going to be talking about Irredeemable Volume 1. This was created and written by Mark Waid. The artist is Peter Krause. The colorist is Andrew Dahlhaus, and the letterer is Ed Dukeshire. So this is a book I read as it was coming out back in the day. Let's see, when was the trade was published in 2009. I can't remember. I guess the issues would have been coming out around that time. But this is from Boom Studios. And this tells the tale if you want to use the character in this story, the Plutonian, as an analog for Superman. This is what would happen if Superman if Superman went evil. Of course, they are kind of telling that story now in the Injustice books, which we talked about last week. But this is a bit more hardcore. In this trade, in this volume, we don't know why the Plutonian has gone bad. We only know that he has. I'm sure we learn at some point in the future, in future issues, what happened, what made him snap. But all we really know at this point is, so he used to be like the world's greatest hero. And he really is an analog for Superman. He can fly. He's invulnerable. He can hear. His hearing is so great that he could hear around the world. He has some type of laser vision that comes out of his eyes. And he's super, super fast, super speed. He is basically an unstoppable force. And when the trade opens up, this is the house of another hero. I don't think they say the hero's name at all in this. But it's at this guy's house where he and his family live, and the Plutonian, what a freaking hard name to say. The Plutonian is there, and this other hero, or he could be, I'm assuming he's a hero, he's trying to get his family out. He's waking his young daughter up, scaring her to death. His wife is there holding their baby, but it's too late. The Plutonian's there. And the first thing he does is he uses his heat vision, his laser vision, whatever it is, and he kills the man's wife and small baby. And he basically just melts everything off of their skeleton. Just one blast and boom, they're just skeletons crashing to the floor. And then he ends up killing the hero, and we assume his daughter as well. We don't actually see him killing the daughter, but he kills the hero, and the daughter is laying there on the floor in the underground lair of this hero. Now there's a view screen, there's a monitor in there showing a news feed that says Hornet unable to stop Plutonian rampage. So this may be the Hornet. But she's laying there in tears, scared to death, and the Plutonian looks down at her and he says, "Do you know who I am, Sarah?" And he whispers in her ear, "I'm a superhero." And then the house explodes and the Plutonian flies away. So I'm not going to go as in-depth in this issue as I did with the Daredevil books, but in this or in this trade anyway, this volume. But you have a super team called the Paradigm, and they are trying to find out as much as they can about the Plutonian. So if you want to say that the Plutonian is an analog for Superman, there's actually some really major differences between the two. The Plutonian, first of all, has been very secretive among the other superheroes as far as who he is, where he comes from, where he got his powers. They don't know anything about him other than the fact that he is a superhero who is apparently unstoppable. His stomping grounds was a city called Sky City. And at this point in the story, Sky City has been leveled. The Plutonian rained down meteorites on Sky City and just leveled the city. There's hardly anyone left alive in the city. And he used to wear this white costume with a red cape, and now his costume is black and red with no cape. And again, we don't know what it was that drove him away, but this superhero team is trying to figure out how to stop him. And the only way they can do that is by trying to gather as much information about this man as they can to see if there is any clue as to how to stop him. What they do learn in this trade is that they found the woman who, the only woman anyone has ever known to be the Plutonian's girlfriend. And she is still living in Sky City. She's one of the few people still living in Sky City. And she ends up telling one of the heroes, about the first time that they met. And you find out that he was posing. She worked at a news studio, I believe, like a radio station. And the Plutonian worked there as well. He had a secret identity. And the guy used to, she could tell that this guy had a crush on her, but she didn't really have a thing for him. She didn't think he was creepy or anything, but then she starts going out with the Plutonian. And then eventually he tells her, I'm really Dan Hardigan, I think the guy's name was. Well, in most comic books, when you have the hero revealing his secret identity to the woman that he loves, and she is in love with him, she tends to, oh my goodness, it's really dumb. But in this one, he tells her, I'm Dan Hardigan and I'm really the Plutonian. And she freaks out. She tells him he's crazy. Why has he been lying to her this time? Is this kind of all this time? Why is this, is this some kind of sick joke? Is this some little game you play? Is this what you get off on? Is, making me think you're someone else? And she just really doesn't handle it well. And she runs into, like a sound booth, with there's a bunch of people in there, engineers and a the on-voice personality, all this stuff. And first thing she does, she opens the door and she goes, Dan Hardigan is the Plutonian. And he comes running in after her, and he has not made any effort to conceal the fact that he's now the Plutonian, because the Plutonian has different colored hair. He had been wearing a wig. He had taken the wig off. He'd opened up his shirt. His costume is on underneath it. And the guy in front of the mic goes, oh my gosh, we have to tell the world about this. And he flips a switch and he says, this just in, the Plutonian is really Dan Hardigan, employee at, and he just, the Plutonian just freaks out, and he flies out of the room through the ceiling and makes it to the satellite. It's like the signal from the station to the satellite should take 3.2 seconds before then it's beamed all over the Earth. He makes it up there before, within that, before that 3.2 seconds is up, and destroys the satellite. So the information doesn't get out. And then he comes back down and he just starts screaming at everybody. Do you know what you've done? You now know my secret. Your lives are now in danger. All of my enemies will use you to get to me. And they're like, well, we're not going to tell anybody. Really? You're not going to tell anybody? You're not going to have a moment of weakness? Can you be sure that anyone else in this room is not going to tell anybody? And you find out that eventually, that over the years, each one of these people have died committing suicide because they couldn't live with the fear anymore. So we see in that moment that he's not entirely stable, because he, first of all, his girlfriend doesn't handle it very well, and then he doesn't handle her reaction very well. And he handles it probably the way any normal person might handle something like that. But of course, he is the most powerful person on the earth. He is basically a god. So the only other scene I wanted to talk about in this issue is the UN is meeting, and the ambassador for the United States is trying to get the other ambassadors from the UN to form, a coalition to try to stop the Plutonian. If they marshal all their forces, maybe they can stop him. And a lot of these other ambassadors are like, we can't stop him. He's unstoppable. Are you kidding me? He can hear what we're talking about right now. No matter where he's at in the world, he can hear what we're talking about. We don't want the Plutonian, we want to offer, Singapore at one point is, I think the ambassador to Kenya says, we want to offer Kenya as the Plutonian's new home. We'll set him up. He can be our king and he can rule over us. And Singapore's like, no, we want him to come to live in Singapore. He can be, fabulously wealthy and have all this power over all of us. And then the Plutonian shows up and he's like, no, please continue. And he looks at the guy from Singapore and he goes, tell me, why is it that you want me to live in Singapore? And as he's talking to him, he's listening to the man's heartbeat. And the man basically says, because we love you, or something like that. And he can tell by the man's heartbeat that he's lying. So to punish him, he flies out into space and he finds diamonds in meteorites and throws them through the atmosphere into Singapore. And there's the island. He's trying to cover the island in diamonds. And the other superhero team, who has managed to find a place where they can hide from him, and he doesn't know they're there. They see what's going on, and there's a certain team member named Cubit who is apparently a genius. And he realizes what it is that the Plutonian is trying to do. And so they each have these teleportation bracelets. They all teleport to Singapore, and their job is rescue as many people as you can. We can't stop them. Rescue as many people as you can. Open up portals. Get them out of here. That's the mission. And they're getting people out, and he's still got a big crowd of people. There's millions of people on this island. They're not getting a chance to rescue them all. Cubit starts yelling at the Plutonium, you can't do this. There's millions of people that you're going to die, that you're going to kill. Plutonium flies down and grabs the teleportation bracelet off Cubit's wrist. Thank you, Mr. Train, for being stupid. And Cubit is yelling, you can't do this. All these people are going to die. And Plutonium just looks at him and he goes, choose 10. And Cubit's like, whoa, my God, what am I going to do? And he just goes, okay, you. I'm sorry, there's no other way to do this. He grabs 10 people. They all move aside. And then Plutonian just vaporizes those 10 people with his eyes. And he looks at Cubit and he says, that's how that feels. He gives him his bracelet back, and he goes back to throwing diamonds down on the island. Cubit gets as many people out as he can. And then Plutonium pushes the island underwater and drowns everyone else. And that's kind of how the issue ends. It's just freaking scary. It's just a scary, horrifying idea that someone like Superman could just turn into, from the world's greatest hero to just this homicidal maniac that would kill at a whim. There's even a scene at one point where he is watching a couple. He's in their room. He's making a couple have sex. Sorry, I have to say it. And he's watching them, and one has short blonde hair like he does, the man, and the woman is wearing a black wig to resemble one of the heroines on the Paradigm. It's just freaking, he's just a creepy he's a creepy homicidal god is what he is. And that's the first volume, and I am definitely going to get the others because I do want to finish this story because I remember it getting even better as it goes along, but I never finished the series, and I'm really looking forward to finishing it. So that's Irredeemable. Let's take another break, and then we will wrap up the episode, and I'll send you on your way. How does that sound? Sound good? Let's do it.
was another cold winter, but I'm back to burn. Everybody got an ego that about to hurt. I give it a cold shoulder like a lover's sperm, but I get it already and your respect is earned. Spun a couple records, now the tables turn. Spit it on your fables, now the lessons learned. Graveyard shift, digging up my past. Held onto my stomach until I got the last laugh. Held my hands, white knuckles to the whole crash. Nowadays that credit can't get the cash. Acid bath, cannonball, make a splash. Pissing off old homies like a Dame and Dash. Understand we get the joke. You cast illusions in a haze of smoke. I was there at the start and I'm ready to blaze for folks. Your first mistake was that you ever spoke.
You think that's funny? It's a panic. What are you in? Singing and dance. A story of greed, sex, murder. Parts are out of line. I'm gonna let it be beautiful.
Best advice I ever got was to kill your heroes. Roll with a crew with like-minded weirdos. Naysayers come around, neglect the heroes. Raise your voice.
Okay, so that's the episode, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. I always enjoy doing it. I enjoy putting these things together, even though I'm out in my car. And even though it was below freezing just 2 days ago, it's nice and warm today. I almost feel like there's a higher power out there that just doesn't want me to do this podcast. Or at least they don't want me to be comfortable. They want me to suffer for my art. This is so not art. So let's just wrap things up here. I feel like there was something else I wanted to say. I had it right there on the tip of my tongue, and I can't quite remember what it was. Oh, I want to remind everybody that episode 10 is coming up, and I want to do an Ask Me Anything episode, an AMA. But in order to do that, y'all got to ask me anything. It's pretty easy to ask me a question. Just send me an email at stevenorelse@gmail.com. Just send it on in. Ask me what size shoes I wear. Ask me what my favorite color is. Ask me how I prefer to spend a Sunday afternoon, or ask me if I pluck my nasal hairs. It doesn't matter. Ask me anything. As long as it's safe for a child to hear, I will answer your questions. Provided you're not asking me stuff like, what's your date of birth? What's your social security number? What's your mother's maiden name? Stuff. I'm not gonna give you ways to steal my identity. Now, if you could steal my identity and then take over all my debt, then I might be willing to talk to you about that. But that's not usually the way it works. So I'm not going to give you information that's going to let you become me. Trust me, you don't want to be me. So the music from this episode, the intro and the outro, is by Trinity X. You can find it and more music from the band at Bandcamp over at Atomic Zombie Records. The link will be in the show notes. The rest of the music, as I said, is by kHill. You can find him at mikalkhill.com. That's MIKALKHILL.com. You can also find him over at Bandcamp at mikalkhill.bandcamp.com. Again, the links will be in the show notes. All you have to do is click on them, and boom, you're there. kHill, I will tell you, since I do keep the podcast clean, he is a fan of dropping F-bombs in his songs. His songs are amazing. I'm a huge fan of kHill, and he's also a super freaking nice guy. But he does not make music for children. So just keep that in mind if you're going out and you want to get, for example, his newest album, Human Disaster, and listen to it, and just make sure you know that there are words that you may not want your children to hear. He also has a really great EP called Beachy Keen, in which he has taken a few of his songs and turned them into beach music. Friggin' genius. But that's kHill. Check him out if you liked any of the songs that I played in this episode. And of course, I only played songs that I like. So obviously they're good songs because, frankly, I have great taste. So that's it, folks. Tell me what you think of the show. Send me an email, stevenorelse@gmail.com. Leave me an iTunes review. Send me a pie through the mail. Of course, I'm not going to give you my address. But, if you wanted to send me a pie, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. But as much as I would like a pie to be sent to me through the mail, or maybe some cheesecake, that's probably not going to happen. If you want to support me in any way, there's actually 2 different ways you can do that. You can join my Patreon and be a patron for as little as $1 a month. If you do that, you automatically get exclusive access to my other podcast called My Other Podcast. If you're not somebody who wants to commit to monthly payments, you can buy me a coffee for as little as $3. That's over at the coffee website, which the URL I don't have in front of me, but the link will be in the show notes. You can just go in, say, buy this man a coffee, and I get $3. The reason why it's called coffee is because it's the price of a coffee. You know, don't go to Starbucks today. Spend the $3 on me. That's what you should do. Or not, you know, it's up to you. I don't have a lot of money to throw around, so it's not like I'm asking you to do something that I do all the time. I'm perfectly happy with you listening to this podcast every week without any monetary involvement. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't give it away for free. And I do because I enjoy it, and I think y'all are awesome, and I like listening to the sound of my own voice over and over and over and over again. So that's the end of the episode. Hey, let's try to be positive in life, people. I know it's a really crappy world out there, and there are a lot of people out there who it seems like their goal in life is to bring you down, but you can't let them do that. You got to be positive. You got to smile. You got to be nice. You got to be polite. And then maybe other people will take a cue and start doing it as well. Those are my words to you, people. If you want people to be nice to you, you got to be nice to them. You know, the golden rule is treat people the way you want others to treat you. And if that really is the golden rule, and if people are out there following it, man, there must be a bunch of people that want me to be a jerk. Because there are a lot of jerks out there. But I try not to give it back. I try to remain polite, happy, and keep the positivity flowing. Because that's how the world goes around, folks. Let's keep it positive out there. Let's enjoy life. Let's read some comics. And let's just be us. Can we do that? Let's do it. See ya!
Bye-bye, Daddy.
Bye-bye, Daddy.
Good job.